Let's go down to the Middle East, which unfortunately has deteriorated further over the summer. Joining me now, Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Malcolm Davis. Malcolm, thank you for your time. We've touched on the politics at the top of the show about the Foreign Minister's visit, but how do you think it's going to go down in Israel by her refusal to visit those southern towns?
Look, I don't think it's going to help. I think that it's unfortunate that she's chosen not to visit the kibbutz. Essentially, they're only a short distance from where she's holding meetings with the Israeli government. So really, there's no valid justification for her to say she can't visit them. And I think it would have shown sensitivity on her part to the victims of that Hamas attack to at least go and visit the site of the attack. She is meeting with the victims, the survivors, I should say, of that attack, but she should at least go to the site where that attack occurred and recognise the loss that occurred there on October the 7th.
What about the case being brought by South Africa? They're a proxy, of course, in the International Court of Justice against what's been labelled Israel's genocidal acts. We know the case could take some years to play out, but South Africa is pushing for interim measures which would stop Israel bombing targets. Is this going to hamper Israel's efforts to eliminate Hamas?
Look, I don't think it's a justifiable case. My understanding of the term genocide means a deliberate attempt to wipe out a race of people. And the last time that happened, ironically, was the Nazi Germany trying to eliminate the Jewish people. I think what you have here is Israel trying to defend its country against Hamas, which is, after all, about wiping out the Israeli people and wiping out the state of Israel. And they are trying to do this in incredibly complex operational circumstances. Gaza is a very small, constrained and heavily congested operational environment that's urban in nature. There's not a lot of space for people to hide. Israel has given every opportunity for Palestinian civilians to try and escape from the area where hostilities are occurring. Unfortunately, there's nowhere for them to go. And also equally unfortunate is that Hamas are denying them the ability to flee. So I think that Israel is trying to do what it can to avoid civilians. But I do think there is a case to be made to the Israelis to transition away from large-scale use of air power and artillery and emphasise more on ground force actions that can be more discriminate and operate more within the laws of armed conflict. I think that's a justifiable request.
Talk to me about the Red Sea, because Australia backed those airstrikes against the Houthis' stronghold in Yemen last week. But, of course, we snubbed a US request to send a warship, a frigate, in December. It was big news. I was overseas in the US at the time. Big news over there. Certainly big news also in the UK. Lots of other countries were there. I felt we really squibbed it. Given how much of our trade comes through that trade route, everyone's now going around the Horn of Africa. That adds at least 10 days and many, many costs, obviously, to shipping into Australia. Can we do more?
We certainly can do more. And I think that, this crisis in the Red Sea is not over yet. Today, the Houthis tried to launch an anti-ship cruise missile, which was intercepted by a US Navy fighter jet. I think that this is likely to go on. You're likely to see the Houthis continue to fire missiles. So what we could do, for example, is send aircraft into the region known as Wedgetails, which could directly support the US Navy and Royal Navy operations by providing additional air defence cover. We could also provide additional aircraft to airborne refuel US Navy and US Royal Navy, US Navy jets. And I think the other thing we could do is backfill US Navy forces in the Indo-Pacific to free them up to go to the Indo-Pacific. So there is more that we can do.
Well, we'll watch that one closely when Parliament returns. Just quickly, the Taiwanese elections over the weekend. President Xi has made it very clear he wanted Taiwan to fall into line. They didn't. They rebuked Beijing and they re-elected the Democratic Progressive Party. What happens now? How's this going to play out with Xi?
Okay, what's going to happen is that the Chinese are going to escalate their coercive grey zone actions to try and intimidate and coerce the Taiwanese people into accepting what is known as the 1992 consensus, which is Beijing's terms for imposing unification. That will fail because the Taiwanese people have seen what happened to Xinjiang, what happened to Tibet, what happened to Hong Kong. They don't want unification with China under Chinese Communist Party rule. The vast majority of Taiwanese want the status quo. That's unacceptable to Xi. So I think that what you will see eventually, potentially in the second half of this decade, once it becomes clear that coercion has failed, is that China will use force to try and impose unification on Taiwan against the will of the Taiwanese people. And then Australia, the US, Japan, and others have a critical decision to make on how to respond to that act of aggression by China.
Right, Malcolm Davis, that is a worrying concern, but we know it's real. Thank you for your time.